Welcome to Nada Yada Island.
We're back on the Nada Yada Island Confessions Show. Benny is about to tell us how he found two loves. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks to Metro, I found iPhone 12 and Apple Watch SE.
At Metro, get the perfect match of both iPhone 12 with 5G and Apple Watch SE for only $99.99. You heard that right. Both for just $99.99. Holidays with Nada Yada Yada, only at Metro by T-Mobile.
Bring your number and ID, sign up for Metro Flex Plus, and add a watch line. Not available if you're with T-Mobile or been with Metro in the past 180 days. Limit 2 per account.
Welcome to Mind Love Premium, episode 75. Today's episode is all about being your own human experiment, with some examples in chanting and telepathy.
Curiosity is about the darkness, about the unknown. Like, what is there that I don't know? And like, that's part of darkness too. And that's really like a part of the hero's journey. A part of adventure is like, I want to understand what's there that I don't know about, and I'm just going to go exploring. And that's a natural part of being human, really, is this how my character is going to evolve through this process of discovering from the unknown, like illuminating the darkness in our own story.
It's a new day, a new episode, and a new opportunity to subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you always know about new episodes. Plus, it makes you one of my favorite people. Because the more subscribers I have, the more I attract amazing guests to help better serve you. So don't forget to subscribe. When was the last time you performed your own human experiment on yourself? Okay, it sounds kind of creepy and like Dr. Frankenstein-esque, right? But it shouldn't. I think self-experimentation might be one of the purposes of life. I kind of imagine a bunch of souls gathered around deciding who wants to take the plunge into Earth School. What would be their motivation for going? I really doubt it would be very enticing for these all-powerful beings to know that they're coming just to follow a set structure that's already been laid out. Go on now, little soul. You're going to be in a human body, and it can do amazing things, but mostly you're going to use it to slump at a desk or on a couch. You're going to have feelings, but don't make them too big or you'll make people uncomfortable, so just hold back, okay? You're probably going to take some drugs throughout your lifetime, but the really cool ones that we left for you that may help you remember us, those will be illegal and very hard to find. Don't worry though, you will be able to take some. They come in little orange bottles and many are highly addictive and may cause you to lose your will to live, but lots of those will be legal because it makes the Earth people money. There are lots of ways to take care of yourself and to biohack your human using the resources the Earth provides, but you probably won't know about them because it doesn't make the powerful humans money. Oh, and there's some really great food on Earth. It's one of the things Earth is known for, but a majority of the food you will eat are actually food-like chemical compounds with pretty colors and enticing branding that will slowly destroy your body. And like we said, you might be slumped at a desk most of your waking hours doing things you find meaningless, so you won't really care your body is breaking down because you'll be ready to get out of there after just a few decades. Okay, I'll stop. Sounds like a dystopian nightmare. There's just no way that version of life is why we came here. I imagine it more like this. You're going to be in a human body, and it can do amazing things, so you're going to have the chance to help it work optimally. There's still so much to learn. Many humans have forgotten just how powerful they are, so it's your job to remember and to remind others. Remembering your nature is best done in nature, and thankfully, nature is beautiful, so spend a lot of time there. So many natural resources help you biohack your systems, so experiment. Many humans have fallen into patterns that benefit other people without even knowing, so challenge your thoughts and your habits every day. Veer away from the norm and don't listen to criticism. You're going to have feelings, so really feel them. Don't be afraid of the big ones. They're guiding you toward your true path. Now that sounds like an experiment I'd like to take on. That sounds like a reason to come to Earth School, even despite the pain we experience here. I'm always experimenting on myself. And don't worry, I'm not like mixing bathroom cleaners together and ingesting it. But I am seeing if there are little things I can tweak in order to find a better way to be in this world. So everything from meditating regularly, trying new schedules, waking up earlier, sleeping more, eating differently, breaking habits, creating new ones, different styles of movement or vocal practices, including just screaming. I used to have depression pretty badly. It would come and go. So in my early 20s, I was on medication for it. I also have ADD, so I was prescribed a large dose of Adderall for over a decade. But even when I was heavily medicated, doing those things that I thought were helping me, maybe I wasn't daydreaming about dying so often, but I can't say I was really living. I still didn't feel good with all the doctor's help, especially in my body. For me, a big turning point was realizing that most of the approved ways of helping yourself, especially if it's approved by some administration or organization, they are profiting somebody else. So can I really trust that they have my best interest in mind? To me, it felt more like they were just ensuring they had a lifelong customer. And just a disclaimer, I am not demonizing Western medicine. I'm sharing my experience with it. I definitely think there's a place for it. And there have been so many medical wonders, almost miracles. So if you're prescribed something and you feel good about it, go for it. But for me, I don't think that a pill is the first or the best option for helping myself, because those pills never really get to the root of the problem. And again, this is for me and my experience. I started to feel that pull from my intuition, that maybe there was a different way. So I listened, and that turned out to be right for me. Well, when I actually started to experiment with what I was consuming in my body and my mind, or how I was moving, or who I was blending my energy with, that's when things in my life started to change drastically. At one point in my life, I assumed that all the things worth doing were likely to have been proven effective or ineffective already. So I'd Google, is vitamin C effective? And I'd see all these things about how it's not proven and blah, blah, blah. So the next time somebody told me to take vitamin C, I'd say, well, did you know there's not really any scientific evidence that it actually does anything? And what I wouldn't realize is that vitamin C just doesn't make people enough money to be supported by a large medical study. Whereas competing products or products with long names that ends with oxipin, those do. Not to mention, vitamin C boosts your immune system so you may not fall ill as often, which then decreases your chance of becoming a customer. So regardless of how long something like vitamin C has been used and all of the anecdotal evidence, your doctor is most likely not going to send you home with vitamin C. And I'm bringing this up not because I want to get into some big discussion about big pharma, but because this is true for so many potential life-changing things worth doing. Just because your doctor isn't telling you to take cold showers every morning to optimize your body doesn't mean it's not highly effective. Just because you aren't prescribed vitamin D doesn't mean it doesn't have the ability to make you happier and healthier when you go outside and stand in the sun. And one more disclaimer, because I feel like so many people have emotions around this topic one way or the other, like they feel like they're on a team and they've got to defend their team to the death. Well, I'm not saying to go drink a potion from the witch doctor down the street, unless you really trust her. I'm saying that we all have more power and more capacity to completely change our lives than we really understand. Look at Wim Hof, over there defying what we thought was ever possible for a human, taking 2-hour ice baths and hiking Mount Everest in shorts, just living his best life. People are claiming the ability to unlock telepathy or astral projection or seeing auras or speaking to spirit guides or speaking languages they've never officially learned. Those people that lead the way of possibility don't wait for approval or even proof. They have an idea and they act. Or they ask for guidance and then follow it. So today we're talking to someone who lives the philosophy that he is his own experiment, and his name is Derek Loudermilk. He's been on the show before, almost 3 years ago, and he's actually been his own primary subject of over 50 metaphysical experiments, including telepathy, chanting, and astral projection. So 3 key things we will learn are how to unlock your voice, how to align energies using chanting, and a daily practice for telepathy. Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up, or text the word morning to 33777. And now let's welcome Derek Loudermilk back to the show.
Alyssa, great to be back. Great to see you again.
Yeah, last time we spoke, you had a baby. I did not. You were sharing me the glories of it. And I was like, I don't know about it. And now I'm like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with this guy. And not you, my baby. But
I convinced you. Maybe not convince you, but
yeah, it was only you. That call is the only sole reason I've had a baby. So thanks for that. So in the last few years, we've both been up to a lot. I had a baby, and you've been basically biohacking, doing human experiments on yourself to share all of the glory with all of us so that we don't have to. Give us a little brief rundown of what you've been up to and why.
Yeah, and I was almost thinking it might be spiritual hacking might be a better term because it encompasses both materialistic, like doing things on my physical body, but also a lot of multidimensional practices and awareness. And as a former scientist, I've really had to, I've always been an experimentalist, but I had to move beyond the material world to learn a lot of these things. And I've been on that journey for about 7 years, but just getting more involved recently over the last couple of years.
So with everything that you've done, before we get into the specifics, what do you think has been like the overarching lesson or big thing that you've learned through it?
It's the universe is such a wonderful, fascinating, and loving place. Like every time I uncover something, it's just like, wow, the universe is so perfect, and it's all set up exactly how I would want it to be, and so it's just very affirming in that regard to have it just keep coming back to love and goodness and connection and all these things, which are great to talk about, but to actually experience over and over again in different ways is wonderful.
I've actually been reaching out to different people that I just plant medicine experiences, a lot of the different types of spiritual hacking. I've been really interested in interviewing spiritual leaders at this time, especially because I feel like I need that. I need to be in the spiritual world in order to kind of keep my hope through everything going on in the world. And it is, you're right. Like I go back and forth between wanting to stay really informed and to be prepared, but it's a bummer. It's a huge bummer being super informed. And so then I'm like, wait, I need to step back and just remember what's true. And I don't think that is necessarily anything that's going on in the world. It's the truth of what is, which just always comes back to love. I think love is the number one truth, so to speak. And but it's really easy to forget when we're just in the day-to-day of everything.
Yeah, I noticed it myself when I get sucked into something that brings me into like, I'm going to fight the power. And then I get into this totally different state where I'm like, okay, here's all the reasons why we should be doing it differently. And it's like, it's a very heavy thing to feel. And it's just draining to me a lot of the times. And so a lot of times I'm just choosing not to engage on things when other social media people are stepping in. Oh, you should, silence is violence. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't feel like weighing in on any of that stuff. A few times I do, and it's just almost never worth it. So,
yeah, I understand that because on one hand, I get mixed messages even in response, but it's less about how other people respond and more about like really sitting with myself and saying, how do I feel right now? And so there's this balance between like activism or creating the world you want to be in. But you said something that kind of stood out where you're like, well, when you get into that, you feel like, well, things should be different. And what I keep trying to remind myself is that I don't have the full picture from my limited human perspective. And I don't have to condone or agree with certain things that are going on for them to be playing out exactly as they should. And I don't know how everything's going to end. And it doesn't really matter what side you're on. You can look at that from either of the perspectives, whichever thing creates the most fear within you. You don't know the entire truth. You cannot know 100% what is true and what is not. Byron Katie has been reminding me of this recently. And so the change that you create starts from inside. And so the more that I actually tune into my own body and I'm like, well, what do I want to see? What do I feel like everyone else should do more of? That's just like a reflection for me to do more of that thing or to be more of that thing.
Yeah. And speaking of kids, I see this, they say like, one enlightened person can impact, 700 million people or something like that. It's a logarithmic scale of influence of love. But so if I go out with my 3-year-old daughter and she's just like smiling and loving on everyone in the grocery store or something like that, and then it just like the whole mood in the grocery store changes, right? It's just like she's just like coming in and being like, bing, fairy dust here, a little bit of magic and some smiles and laughter. And it changes the whole thing. And she's not doing anything. She's just being, right? And so that ripples out. And so it's such, I see it illustrated over and over again. Anybody can do this if you get into a state where you have unconditional love for anyone you meet, right? And sometimes I like to practice like putting little angel wings on the homeless people as I walk by them, or, pretending I'm everyone's father and I'm just like spreading unconditional love, but like whatever way that you do it, then you can tell that they pick up on it, even though you're not even interacting with someone.
Growing a business is a lot like personal growth. You need the right tools and the right support system. But finding those perfect team members, that can kind of feel like searching for a unicorn, which is why I'm excited about Indeed's approach. Instead of endless searching, they focus on matching. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. It's a matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors. And here's what makes it so special. Their technology actually learns what works for you. So the more you use it, the better it gets at finding people who align with your vision. Think of it as your hiring meditation app. It helps you cut through the noise and focus on what matters. You can schedule, screen, and message candidates all in one place. And it works. 93% of employers say Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites. And that's why more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide trust Indeed to help them hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/mindlove. Just go to Indeed.com/mindlove right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/mindlove. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
This episode is brought to you by Etsy.
Oh.
Hear that?
Okay. Thank you.
Etsy knows these aren't the sounds of holiday gifting. Well, not the ones you're hoping for. You want squeals of delight. Happy tears.
How did you?
And spontaneously written songs of joy.
I am so happy. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, the song needs a bit of work, but anyway, to get those reactions, make sure everyone on your list feels heard with handmade, handpicked, and designed gifts from small shops on Etsy. Gifts like personalized jewelry, custom artwork, cozy style items, vintage pieces, and home decor to celebrate all of your favorite people and their specific kind of special. For original gifts that say, I get you, Etsy has it.
Back to Byron Katie. I read Byron Katie's book a long time ago, and then I decided to re-dive into the audiobook of Loving What Is. And it was like a whole new book because I'm a new person since the last time I went through the information. And so then I just became obsessed and started reading every single book that she has. So I really have Byron Katie top of mind. But the amount of times that I have to remind myself with my own thoughts, like, is that true? And it could be a judgment about somebody else. And it's like, who would you be without that story? Who would that person in front of you be without your story about them? Because that's what I've noticed. Like, I've spent so much time on either side of so many arguments because that's kind of how I deal with judgment. Because I know that when I have like a very strong opinion about something, the other side seems evil. You know, like it's very easy to look at the other side to either think of them as ignorant or stupid or uninformed or evil. And what I found, though, if I actually spend time getting to know that person or the other side of the argument, they have very valid points. And I find that they see something differently. Like maybe they support the values of something, but they don't think that the party, so to speak, is doing anything about that. They think they're lying or whatever, rather than being against that thing that you think they're against or whatever it is. They just see it differently.
There's equally, in the eyes of the universe, is an equally valid path to be a negatively polarized person. So if they're, and the negative polarity uses like control and fear and those types of tactics to get what it wants. And in the evolutionary sense, it's equally as possible to learn things for your progression on that side of things as it is on the positive, loving side of polarity. So from the sense of the universe, they're like neither one is good or bad, but that's the difference between David Hawkins. I was just talking about this with Aaron Abke. David Hawkins calls it power versus force. And so love attracts. Love is a magnetic thing, and you bring momentum to something. You attract a group of people around an objective, versus the negative polarity will try to use methods to divide and control and manipulate in order to reach an objective. So there's different traits that the sides uses, but both are equally valid in terms of like the progression of evolution of a soul.
Oh, I love that. And it actually reminds me too, because I was in one of my rabbit hole days doing all the research and then realizing, oh, I can feel that in my body and I need to take another break and just only focus on my own personal vibration. And I was reflecting on the last few years and looking at different times that I spent maybe too much time looking into the dark side without balancing it out. And so feeling how that was affecting me, feeling how that was affecting my vibration, which then I would spread with whoever that I would meet unintentionally, and it wasn't like I was going out and intentionally being a Debbie Downer. But I think when you don't feel super hopeful, even if you have a smile on your face, you're spreading that. You're spreading the energy that you're carrying. And so I was talking to a family member I trust about this, and she said, she reminded me that even when it seems like the world is getting worse, the darkness has to come into the light for it to transform. And so in both aspects of that, and I could see that reflected not just in the world, like I choose to think that everything's going to turn out better than it was before. Like I want to think that all of this stuff is happening because there are outdated structures that aren't helpful for us, that are creating division and unfairness, and the world is being shook up right now. Like we're seeing things in a new way. People are awakening to things that we didn't know before, that we didn't see so clearly. And in the same token, when I go through that process and I go into the depths of darkness, because I have always had really strong emotions. It's the empath in me, I assume, but I'll go through a period of just feeling dark, and then I have to bring out all of my tools to come back into the light. But every time I come back to the light, it's like it's a little lighter than it was last time I was there, And so it's like I'm going into there to dig it up, to reveal it so that I can bring awareness to it, so that I can bring the healing to it. So I think that reflection of outside and inside is exactly how it works. And the more that I do that work within myself, the more I'm going to actually see that happening outside of myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I just came across a new way of viewing darkness, which falls in line with my identity of a long time as an adventurer and explorer. And that's kind of some of the stuff we were talking about last time we got together for an episode. And really, curiosity is about the darkness, about the unknown. Like, what is there that I don't know? And like, that's part of darkness too. That's really like a part of the hero's journey. A part of adventure is like, I want to understand what's there that I don't know about, and I'm just going to go exploring. And that's a natural part of being human, really, is this how my character is going to evolve through this process of discovering from the unknown, like illuminating the darkness in our own story.
Oh, I love that, because we tend to associate darkness with something negative, where it doesn't have to be that at all. It could just be a lack of awareness. It could just be the things that are still lurking in the shadows that you haven't brought out. And it's not, we all have those shadow sides. We all have I remember interviewing Teal Swan, who talked a lot about the shadow side and integrating that and not bringing judgment to it, and realizing that instead of shaming those darker parts or the parts of ourselves that we aren't proud of, just realize that we're all complex, multifaceted humans, and we're all of that at once, and being okay with that and accepting and loving that is the best way to actually not just integrate it, but actually love ourselves entirely.
I like Teal Swan. Yeah.
Teal Swan's controversial, but I like her. I went down the rabbit hole of her too, and I came out with a different conclusion than some trending articles, but she is, her videos, you can just kind of hear the wisdom in her. So I'm curious though, what have you been exploring and which experiences have stood out to you?
Yeah. So one of the privileges and approaches that I take on my podcast is I'll discover some healer or some scientific researcher that's found a new modality of whatever it is. And the way I do it is I usually get a session or two with them and experience exactly what it is they've discovered, and then I do the interview. So I'm always giving myself a firsthand experience of the modality, whether it's crystal resonance therapy or biofield tuning or high performance hypnosis, whatever it might be. I want to experience the thing, and then I often read their book and interview them, and it's so cool. I mean, just for example, I'm thinking of crystal resonance therapy, which is kind of like Reiki, but they put crystals all over your body, and it different aspects of the body harmonize with the crystals themselves, and you can feel all kinds of. I can feel, and actually sent some other people to do this as well. But you can feel different sensations, heat or buzzing or ringing in the ear, and then you notice different emotional patterns coming up, and it's so cool just to have that firsthand experience of a thing, and then overlay that with, well, what is the explanation? Why is this happening? How does it work? So I've really started to understand. To understand healing, you have to understand quantum physics and the dimensions and densities and so many different aspects of consciousness and how consciousness creates the material world. And the more I learn, the more I discover I don't know.
I was just saying that to someone. I'm like, wow, every time I go down into deep exploration of something, that's something that actually rocks my world or makes me see something different. I'm like, why do I say I know anything? I don't. And there's a freedom in that. Well, what shifts did you notice? Did you notice any lasting shifts, or was it more just experiential while it was happening?
Yeah, all kinds of lasting shifts. So one example, recently I went on a retreat expedition last year called Vocal Transformation with this woman, Marin Azoff, and she has this method, was given to her by ayahuasca. And it's a combination of Tibetan Buddhism and classical voice training, Broadway singer, recording artist, and plant medicine. So it's weaving all these things together in a way of using your voice and sound and vibration to harmonize the different centers of the body. And I noticed things in myself doing this daily, chanting practice. So I sent my wife on the same retreat to Costa Rica, and she just got back a couple weeks ago. And since she got back, we haven't had a single conflict, which is super rare for us to not be in that type of friction, at least, once a week or something like that. So the reason why, I think, is because there's some amount of I'm no longer judging you or no longer wanting you to be different. I think it comes from accepting ourselves in such a way that we're not trying to get the other person to change, which is where most of our conflict was arising from. You're doing something I don't like. I wish you were different. Why can't you just be different? But now it changes in a way that we're appreciating that we are different. And even though it's inconvenient or a hassle for you not to like these things, then we're not going to get into conflict. But I don't know, it's subtle in a way, but the fact that we're not arguing is the very visible result.
So when you're experiencing a situation where there perhaps would have been a conflict that arises, do you feel that what you've both have gone through just automatically makes it feel seamless, or has it given you the mental tools to kind of talk it out in your head before you create the conflict? Does that make sense?
I know what you're saying. It's not that sluggish. It's more of I and I don't know about her experience, but I feel the charge just sort of arise and quickly dissipate. Whereas before it would stick around for a long time.
So chant for me. I want to know what this chanting is like. I'm so curious.
Each chakra has its own sound. So the root chakra is Lam, and then the sacral chakra is Vam. The solar plexus chakra is Ram, and it goes up. And I've got to the heart chakra right now, which is Yom. And you can feel it resonating in these different locations in your body as you do it.
I learned that. I can't remember if it was a previous episode or yoga teacher training. But one thing that I found actually fascinating was when I did yoga teacher training way back in beginning of 2013, that Sanskrit words are actually, it's the most fascinating language ever, because like the word in Sanskrit for wrist, for example, is when you say it, that's the area of your body that activates through vibration. So in the same way that you're saying when you make that particular sound, that is the heart chakra. And so it's just so interesting to me how it's like these ancient cultures knew these things that were like, oh, wow, how did you have the technology? But it's just like this intuitive knowing, or maybe they received it through a source that they were more connected to than we are because we can't put down our phones or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of yoga people understand that, but the difference is sort of, I never would have thought to spend so much time on a single point in my body, just chanting to a single, so you do a full mala, so that's 108 beads on a mala for 40 days for each center. So you end up doing whatever it is, 42,000 lams for the one chakra, and it's like each one should be fully open and expressed and flowing as an energy center as you move on to the next one. And you have to start at the lower ones in order to support the opening of the higher ones. So the lower three connect through the heart to the higher three. I'm not super technical about it, but I'm experiencing. I get a lot of just joy from doing it as a daily practice.
So what does that daily practice look like?
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit Shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
Hi, I'm Tyler, founder of Cozy Earth. When you're thinking about the perfect gift, what better way to show your loved ones that you care than by giving them something that helps them feel better, sleep better, and adds superior luxury to their everyday life? If you sleep in our sheets for 100 nights and don't absolutely love your experience, we'll refund your money. No questions asked. This year, give the gift of Cozy Earth. Once they try it, they'll never go back.
Go to CozyEarth.com/Spotify and use code Spotify to save up to 40%. That's CozyEarth.com/Spotify.
So what does that daily practice look like? Because you said you're on the heart chakra right now. So it sounds like it's an evolution of like you just started with the root for how long? Was it days? Was it just that session?
Yes, it's 40 days per chakra. 40.
Oh, so that's why you said 42,000 times that you end up saying.
Right. Yeah. So I'm 130 days in to this practice. It's 280 days to go through all 7 chakras.
How long does it take you to do just your daily session?
It's about half an hour. And I like to do it in conjunction with some meditation, but it doesn't always happen. Sometimes I'll even find I have to do it while I'm driving, which is kind of fun because it takes so if you're really putting yourself into it and you're making a really big sound, and partly I'm doing this vocal work so I can speak truth, so I can speak loudly, so I can be authentic, all these different aspects, as a podcaster using my voice. But when you really fill up a room with your voice and the whole sound, it just sort of bathes your whole environment in the sound. And in a car, it's even more so. So it's almost like nothing else exists except for this sound you're creating, which is wild.
A while ago, I interviewed a woman named Madir Nain who it was all about the psychology of Kundalini. And she brought some information about chanting, that there are real scientific studies that show that chanting alone changes your brain. So I can imagine this work that you're doing, along with all of these other benefits that you're aware of, it's also, I don't know, giving you a better brain.
Yeah, and so there's other types of chanting like kirtan, which I've participated in kirtan circles, and that also creates, it's a totally different sense, but it's like a call and response thing generally. Have you done kirtan? Have you?
A little bit, but it's been a while. Back in yoga teacher training, my instructor was very into kirtan, so we went to multiple events with her.
Yeah, I had the experience growing up in church. My favorite part was the singing, just hearing everyone singing together, and kirtan, everyone's doing a call and response, singing together. And that really makes me feel strong emotions, just singing with a whole bunch of people. It's so powerful. And I really, really love that as well.
I have been looking for an adult choir for a while. I saw that somebody just launched one in LA and it looks amazing. I actually, in LA, I found out that, remember Janice from Friends? She leads a choir in Los Angeles, or at least she did a couple of years ago before the world shut down. And so I went and we did the call and response type things, and I actually cried. There's something about the collective vibration that is so, so powerful. And when you're actually in a sound bath of some sort, I don't know about you, but I can feel myself like aligning, like the resonance being absorbed into my body. And so when you consider chanting and you're the one creating that resonance and it's from the inside out, it's got to be even more powerful.
Yeah, and I feel like this is an area where I'm not super expert on the explanations, but a lot of times, maybe I'll go either way. I'll do a bunch of research and then try it, but sometimes I try a thing and then do the research afterwards. And it's really interesting because I'm a former scientist and I like to have the logical, rational explanation in hand. I can kind of go both ways, but I get stuck, and a lot of people get stuck in the understanding, which is different from the knowing. And people stop at the understanding. They read a bunch of books, whatever, and if they haven't sort of fully explored what it's like to do a thing, then you don't actually know it. So sometimes I like to just jump in and try a thing before as a total beginner. So for example, I'm coming up with telepathy games. Like, how would we teach people telepathy in a really easy way? And so the one I tried recently was telepathy telephone, where it's like the normal game of telephone, but you just pass the thought from person to person around a table. So we play this with my family at the dinner table. And then I've been playing with my kids. Like they both love animals. So we'll say, okay, I'm thinking of an animal. What is it? And then everyone guesses. And it's kind of interesting because telepathy, you can get little bits of information. You might not get the whole thing. My son and I in particular seems like we have a easier time picking up on each other. So a lot of times I'll guess the animal right off straight away. But then my wife will be like, she'll guess a feature of the animal. She's like, oh, it's a snake. And be like, no, it was a lizard, or no, it was a turtle. And you're like, oh, I got the skin right, but I didn't get that it was the right species. So you get these partial correctness, which I think is fascinating. And that's just sort of like a playful way of exploring what it's like to have telepathy.
My husband and I have actually practiced different telepathy things, but we haven't done it consistently. But I got really into reading books about intuition. And like you said, I learned a long time ago, my first whole experience of trying self-development was just reading as much as I could. And that was beneficial because it did change some of the thoughts that were floating through my head. But you're right. My life started to change when I started to be like, okay, I've got to actually do the things that this is telling me to do. I can't just pack myself with knowledge. although that did help create the hope so that I was able to have the motivation to do it. Well, I want to be more consistent with that. So I'm curious, what led you into being curious about telepathy and actually bringing that to your family?
Well, I interviewed an animal communicator named Dita Young. She's based out of Denmark, and she works with their Olympic horse show jumping team. And she teaches the riders to essentially be one with a horse. Because you can't sort of force an animal that big to do what you want unless it wants to do it as well. And so then I was like, well, how easy would it be for you to teach me telepathy? And she was like, I could do it in 5 minutes. I was like, what? So after the interview, we did a follow-up session. We did it live on Instagram. And she was like, okay, I'll take you through this sort of induction technique, kind of like a hypnotic induction technique. And then she showed me, okay, here's a picture of a horse. What's wrong with this horse? Like, how's its physique? Is it hurting anywhere? What's its personality like? And these were her clients, so she knew everything already that was wrong with them. And I got it all right on the first try. She gave me 3 different horses, and she's like, "Yep, exactly. Yep, you got it." And I was like, "That's too easy. That's amazing." And just seeing how easy it was for me to just be accurate at this, just by being open. And the tricky part was, something would come into my mind, like a thought or a feeling in my neck or something. And I'm like, is that telepathy? Am I getting this feeling because of the thing? And I would say, I'm getting a feeling in my neck. She's like, yep, he has stiffness in the left side of his neck behind his ear. And I'm like, yep, that's where I feel it. And so interpreting the information was a little bit challenging because it sounded oftentimes like my own thoughts. But she was saying that's probably the horse's thoughts, but coming through in your own inner monologue tone. But I thought that was so cool that with no experience, I could just be telepathic within 5-10 minutes. So I thought, well, if I could practice this, then I could probably get better. And then I could just, learn more about it. So we just started playing around in the last few weeks with that.
So how did she instruct you in this? Just sit there, be open, and what's happening in your body?
It was a series of breaths, which I can't remember, and then a series of visualizations, like different lights. And so imagine the front of your body is open and the back of your body is open, and imagine you're receptive and porous in this way, and you're opening your field to this information. You're inviting it in. It was like how you would invite someone into your house, but it's like I invite my field to be open to your information in a way.
So did you guys talk about this on the episode that she was on, or was this a pre or post call? Can listeners learn where to find this out?
Yeah, you can listen to the interview, and then a couple weeks later on her Instagram, you can see me learn telepathy, and you can see me actually like telling about the horses that she's showing me the pictures of.
I'll make sure to link to both of those things in the show notes because I want to learn. I think that's super interesting. It is funny though. I find that I've talked to a lot of intuitives about, I'm like, make me psychic. Just kidding. I'm like, teach me how you do this. And it's funny because over the last 3 years in particular, I've felt so many shifts of just opening up to like something greater. It's my connectedness. I think it's just trusting the fact that I've always been connected. And so deep in meditation, sometimes when I'm about to fall asleep, I'll just feel this like shift or a wave. But I found that what gets in my own way most often is my self-doubt. It's like I will have a very powerful experience. I'll be feeling that physical feeling of somebody in pain. And I'm like, I think I know this. And I'm like, but why should I know this? Like, is this real? Am I making this up? And in particular, I did a past life regression episode and she guided me through it. And it was interesting because she's just like, well, tell me what's coming to your head. And I really felt like I was making it up. I was like, well, I think like I was following a storyline in my head, but I'm like, isn't this just how every storyline in my head goes? Once I start focusing on it, it just continues. And it felt like I was like making up a story. But I got to one part of it and I burst out into tears. It was like this overwhelming emotion. And it was a past life regression. So the experience was I had apparently 2 young boys and I was stirring soup. And then they ran outside to play and there was an explosion. And I get chills just telling you about it right now, like actual physical chills. And I just started crying. And I was like, I felt like I was making this whole story up. Why am I so attached emotionally to it? And that was my key, that there was something to that there was some realness to it. But if I didn't have that person like validating what I was going through and that emotion validating it, I would have just thought none of it was real.
That's amazing. Was there a specific time period? What was that event, that explosion event?
I'm not sure. I know it was definitely back in the day because it was like this hut. There was like a dirt floor. And I was just stirring. It wasn't really a cauldron, but it was like a big pot of soup. And then I had like two young boys that I just knew they kind of ran through, grabbed a piece of bread and ran out. And then there was an explosion. So I'm not sure. I wish I knew. I should go back.
What I've sort of come to understand about past lives and future lives is that they're all happening at the same time. So if you take this linear perception of time out of the equation, then what happens is we're each sort of a fractal of a larger oversoul, like a branching tree, right? And so the soul that is me is also the soul in my past life, which is happening at the same time as it is now. And what's cool, there's research that often facial features are the same from people who have been reincarnated. Like facial recognition software picks up the same person that they used to be, identifies them now as the kid that they are from the photo of the adult that they were. Just really awesome stuff. So there's themes. It's almost like more than genetics. There's an essence to a soul and the way that it experiences the universe and the way that it evolves. So you'll have these themes. Like I probably was very adventurous in most of my lives, for example. And as far as I can tell, I've been a man in every single life. So there's this like, my soul is real deep into understanding the masculine aspect in a lot of ways. So there's so much to it, and you can sort of tune in to another experiment I'm doing right now is I'm trying to figure out a way to download language. I'm trying to become fluent in French because I had a previous life as a French fur trapper. So I'd like to sort of matrix style instantaneously download his French language skill into my reality by harmonizing with that experience. So that essentially merges that experience into my future, my current experience.
How did you come to be aware of that particular past life?
A couple folks gave me, this is another interview that I did. Carrie Keller and Bonnie Darby, they work as a team, and they'll go back and review a past life. And in particular, they sort of like look through all your past lives, and then they pick one that's relevant for you. And they picked this French fur trapper out of the myriad. And in particular, they said, this guy, he was an entertainer and a storyteller. He would go out and he was trapping in the wilderness, in the Canadian wilderness. And he would come back and into the trading post. And everyone loved him because he came up with all these stories. And he was like almost like a spiritual teacher because he would tell these humorous stories about his time out in nature. And then people would learn from these little parables, just like how Jesus taught. And so they said, you need to learn to teach in these parable style stories to be more impactful. And it's such a random little tidbit to pull from a past life. And they're like, that would probably be the most useful thing you could learn. But of course, I was like, I want to learn French. I'm going to like...
You're all, screw parables, French parables. I need to talk to them. I am definitely going to have you connect me to them if that's okay, because I want to do an episode. That sounds fascinating. And I've got to make sure that I link to that episode of yours as well, because we're just digging into all of this goodness. So when you're thinking about downloading French, how do you see yourself going about that? Is it just purely a focus and again, remaining open and a belief that it can happen? Do you have a template or a process for this?
The way that I'm going about it, and I don't know if this is an appropriate way, but it's to try to really understand what it feels like for that past life to be speaking French for them. And then for me to get into that state of knowing that I'm fluent in French and using it without thinking, just unconsciously good at French. And when I get into the overthinking it, that's when I have trouble. But I can listen with no subtitles to a French movie and I totally understand it. But I still have trouble with speaking it. My accent is really good. I've talked to French speakers and they're like, wow, you sound like a native speaker. So I have a very clean French accent and I can understand when French people are speaking, but I still have trouble forming the words right to get them out to express myself in French.
That reminds me of my baby, because like lately he's been like, he'll just look at me and he'll be like, and I'm like, you clearly think you're saying something and I want to understand so bad. And I think I do. And I'll pretend that I do. Or when before I knew how to play the piano, I remember being really young and we first rented a piano and I couldn't play yet. And I would sit down and there was something inside me that knew I could play. And I'd just go and all of a sudden my fingers would move elegantly and the sounds sounded terrible, but like there was like this belief inside. So I can see what you're talking about of just that sort of knowing that you can unlock something. And I totally think that's possible. But again, we tend to get in our own way. And when you feel yourself getting in your own way, do you just step back and not do the practice at that time? Do you try to find stillness? What's your process through moving through getting in your own way?
That's a really fantastic question, and it's causing me to wonder how I do it. I mean, I use my wife a lot. I'm like, hey, here's what I'm working on, and I'm struggling because it feels like I'm overthinking it or something. So my wife and the shaman that I work with, he simplifies everything, but they both sort of give me this feedback of like, yeah, you're doing great. Yeah, just keep going. And it's like, okay, all right, I'm just thinking about it too much. Like, just keep, it's all fine. It's all way simpler than you're trying to make it. Stop complicating it. Stop thinking. Just do it,
Yeah, that reminds me of meditation in general, where do you remember like the first times you were meditating? And when I had a complete misunderstanding, I think, of what meditation was. We started learning in high school for my cross-country coach was like, you guys need to learn to meditate. And it was all about like clearing your mind for no thoughts. And if you try to clear your mind for no thoughts, you're going to have the loudest thoughts in the world, I believe. At least that's what happened to me. And so then I'd be like, oh, I'm doing it wrong. And then the whole session would be like me beating myself up for not being able to meditate. And then there was, through practice and through a different understanding of what meditation was supposed to be, and allowing the thoughts actually without judgment, and not giving more power to them by adding to the story, but by just kind of accepting them and watching them pass and knowing that that's what the mind is for, is to create thoughts and whatever. Especially, it was about 3 years ago that I started reaching this other place where I would just kind of feel the transcendence, and it would almost feel like floating for a minute, but then I'd get in my own way and be like, oh my God, I've made it. And then I'd like be back in my thoughts again. I'm like, oh, release, or just, and it was more about, it was more of an allowance, because when we try to push something, it's whether we're pushing or pulling, either way, it's resistance. And so that resistance is the thing that I find causes my thoughts to just get louder and to disconnect me from the source that I'm trying to connect with the entire time.
Yeah, it's good to remember. I have a totally different sort of relationship with meditation. I don't actually do it that much like a lot of people, I think. But what I understand now is that I instantly went into astral projection when I started learning meditation. Like the second session, I traveled to the sun, and then pretty much every time I'm either traveling with one of the five elements every time I meditate. And so it's a little bit different for me because I always just get taken somewhere on a journey rather than like sitting with my own thoughts.
So why do you think that you were immediately propelled into astral projection, and what's that experience like?
I was in Cambodia at Angkor Wat, which is one of the ancient sites which is aligned with the sun. Is built to be sort of a physical portal that links with the sun. And so I was there at this retreat center right on the temple, and I was essentially, I was breathing, and then I was breathing in the sun, and then I was inside the sun. And then I just started, I was the sun, I was filled up with light, and I could sort of go anywhere in the universe. And this happened right away. And I was so excited. I told everyone at the retreat center, I was like, I figured, meditation is amazing. Like, it's so cool. And they were like, well, what did you experience? I was like, well, when you become the sun and you can just just go wherever you want. And they were like, no, we were just dealing with all these mosquitoes and the dogs barking next door and like the sweatiness of the tropical environment. I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, they just taught us to do this breathing stuff, and then this happens. So I think I just got lucky with being in the right place. And most commonly I'm connecting with the wind element though, rather than like the sun or fire. And I'm always moving around the world with the wind through my meditation.
Is that like a bird's eye view? Oh, that's cute. I like that middle name. So when you're, just for more clarity on what that's like, you're moving around the world with the wind. Is it like a bird's eye view? Are you actually seeing details of the world, or is it more of just like a knowing and a feeling like you're doing that?
Yeah, it's like experiencing yourself as the wind. Oftentimes when I start a meditation, the wind will pick up where I am, and it'll like sweep my consciousness up into it. Not so much if I'm doing it inside, but whenever I'm doing it outside, the wind will come and I'll just get swept up right along with it. And then, it's just like, I feel like the wind must feel.
And you don't do this all the time? I feel like if that was my experience in meditation, you'd never hear from me again. Melissa's on her pod. She's been there since 2007.
I'm so curious about so many different things. I can't wait. I love when I have that experience in meditation, but also I can't wait to go to sleep at night to experience dream time, because that's such a rich environment. And, or I can't wait to bust out my crystals and learn a new way of working with them. And so it's like, I want to be in the present moment, but I've also got 10 million more experiments in the pipeline that I want to try.
Well, I can't wait to follow all of those experiments. And I'm sure so many listeners are intrigued as to where to hear about all of this stuff. So for listeners that are like, this dude's the most fascinating person I've ever met, where's the best place for them to connect with you and tell them about your podcast?
Yeah, thank you. It's the Derek Loudermilk Show on podcast platforms, and I'm just expanding into YouTube now, which is really exciting. And searching my name will pull up all my socials. I may also, I'm working on something. Another thing that I'm excited about is pulling together a small mastermind of spiritual thought leaders. I'm developing the program right now, but that's something I'll be launching soon. So if that's the type of person you are, then it might be something for you. Just put that in your back of your mind.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/X75. Your challenge for this week is to do a little self-experiment. And again, I'm not talking about ingesting your bathroom cleaners. I'm talking about deciding to do something, anything, a habit change, a mindset trick, a new hobby, a new friend, and just take note of how you feel. Are there any differences in your mind or your body? Note the differences after 24 hours, after 48 hours, after 1 week. I've tried a lot of different habits in my life. A lot of them were to get rid of or replace bad habits, but I've also just started doing something new. And I'm a habitual person, so it ends up becoming a habit or a routine. Well, what I've realized is that the habits that stick are the ones that I make a conscious effort to note the changes. I sit and feel those changes. I praise those changes. Or if I'm breaking a bad habit, I bring awareness to the negative effects that I'm really, really feeling. So I'll give you an example about breaking a habit. 6 months ago, I stopped drinking alcohol. Well, up to that point that I decided to stop drinking alcohol, I was making note of exactly how I felt when I was drinking the alcohol. Did I actually feel better? I was used to saying that it felt better, that I felt less stress, but what I actually noticed was that I was a little bit more tired. I was a little bit more on edge. I was a little bit more involved in my own world instead of showing up for the other people in my world. So with these notes of changes and bringing awareness to these negative things, the bubble of admiration or idolatry that I held for alcohol before started to fade. When I stopped drinking, yes, it was difficult to change the habit, to not want a glass of wine when I was cooking dinner. But I would first replace it with something different, like tea or one of the amazing non-alcoholic concoctions you can get these days, which if you need recommendations, reach out to me on Instagram because I've gone pretty ham on those non-alcoholic alternatives. And I definitely have my favorites and can tell you why I love or dislike each one. Anyways, I took note of how I felt after a glass of that. Did I want to reach for another? Did I feel better about myself? How did I want to spend my time after drinking this versus drinking a glass of wine? So I brought the awareness to what was actually going on rather than the story I had attached myself to. And it helped me see my old habit versus my new habit more clearly. So the same works for self-experimentation, as that was a version of self-experimentation. I did the same thing when I was meditating. I would take note throughout my day. Wow, that was a situation that would normally trigger me, but this time it didn't. Meditation is working. So you build the evidence, but so often we're on autopilot, so we don't see all of those little tiny changes, and it makes us less willing to come back to something, especially when it seems difficult. So let me know how it goes. I want to know what little experiments you are trying on yourself and your world. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa or leave a comment on the show notes page of this episode at mindlove.com/X75. Thank you for all of my premium members. You guys are my inner circle and I love you so much. If you want to become a premium member, you can go to mindlove.com/premium. You become one of the biggest supporters of Mind Love. You help the show go on, and you also get all of the backlogs of exclusive episodes, plus meditations and some other bonuses. Also, I don't really mention this often, but premium members get exclusive access to book a single coaching call with me for 50% off of the normal price. So if you've ever wanted to have a conversation with me or questions have been accumulating during your time of listening, join premium and you can purchase a coaching call right on the checkout page. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next time.